back in 2020.
Let me make a game engine.
Well, actually, it was more of a coincidence. I wanted to see if someone uploaded a video on YouTube about making a 3D game.
How to make a 3D game.
This is when I found the amazing channel called The Benny Box.
I started by simply watching the tutorial series because I found it very interesting. It was probably about 2 days later though that I actually started following the series and trying to build a 3D game engine. As you can imagine, building a 3D game engine isn't an easy task, but like everything else, it has its up moments.
Oh yes! Woohoo!
And its down moments.
Damn it!
So if you go to my GitHub page,
Shit! Who's that disco light mode?
dark mode. Ah, what a relief. Anyways, on my GitHub page you'll find the 3D game engine version 2.0. I might upload the other versions which have updates to it, because this one has really bad coding practices, so I wouldn't recommend getting ideas from it, but you might learn something. I don't know, maybe you won't learn anything, but maybe you'll learn something, who knows. So finally, the part that you've probably been waiting for, a demonstration of this game engine.
And here is the demo. We have lighting, we have mesh rendering, we have terrain, we have a skybox, and of course we have the wonderful water. Yes, I was really keen on doing the water in this game engine, and even though the code isn't that nice, the result is pretty satisfying. So now I would like to show you how to use this 3D game engine and maybe make a simple game on your own. The first thing we need to do is create a class. I created the class off screen, and as you can see, I named the tutorial game. The next thing we need to do is make the class inherit from the game class. You will need to import the engine.core package. The game class has two methods we need to override. The first one is the init method. This is called once at the start of the game. The second one is the game loop method, which is called every frame. Before going any further, we need to make sure that on startup the engine will run the game we've just created and not the test game. All we need to do for our game to run is to go to the main.java file and instantiate our game instead of the test game in the core engine constructor. Let us start by creating a mesh. First thing we need to do is instantiate a mesh. You will need to include the games.entities package. As you can see, the mesh constructor is giving us an error. This is because there is no default constructor for the type mesh. There are 4 constructors. The first one takes a primitive type. The second one takes a primitive type and a detail, which specifies the detail for meshes such as spheres, cylinders, and cones. The third constructor takes a file name and loads an OBJ or DirectX model. The DirectX loader is extremely limited though, and there is a lot of room for improvement. The fourth and final constructor takes 2 arrays. The first array is an array of vertices, and the second array is the array of indices, which specifies the triangles of the mesh. I'll be making a simple cube for now. There are still 2 things left to do to make this cube visible. The first thing we need to do is move the cube away from the origin. By default, the camera is facing the z-axis. To get the cube in view, we need to move it about 5 units forward in the z-axis. You might think that this is enough to get the cube visible. However, rather annoyingly, we have to add the entity to the scene. Instantiating it isn't enough to get it visible. I improved this in newer versions of the engine I made. Now if we run, we should finally get a cube rendered 5 units away from the camera. Right now the scene is pretty dull because there is no lighting and the cube is very basic. To make the scene more interesting, I shall first change the cube into a cone. Then I'll add some lighting, which I'll do with a directional light, which is also an entity. I'll make it white with an intensity of 0.8, and to change its direction I shall rotate it 180 degrees in the x-axis. This will make it look as if the camera is emitting light. Finally, we'll need to add the light to the scene like we did with the mesh. This is the result you should get. Probably one of the most complex topics is materials. Materials in this engine are made of a group of properties. Each property is mapped to the corresponding uniform in the shader. The big drawback of materials in this engine is that you need to look at the shader source code to know which properties exist. If I want to set the color of this mesh, all I need to do is to set the color property to the color I want, in this case, purple. Now you should get a purple cone like this. To show you other examples of properties, I shall set a texture, remove the coloring, and finally add some specular reflection to the mesh. This should give this result. Finally, for fun, let us add some water below the cone. This is the result you should get.
What are you staring at? Can't I change my t-shirt? Oh yeah, I just wanted to say goodbye and thanks for watching. And have fun experimenting.